Please stop using AI browsers. You've probably seen multiple companies releasing different versions of AI browsers. There's Brave's Leo Assistant to Perplexity's Comet, or even OpenAI's brand new Atlas that they announced a couple days ago. They all aim to enable something called agentic browsing. And the idea here, if you're not familiar, is that you would have sort of a personal assistant that could operate your browser for you. And on the surface, this sounds handy for doing things like booking restaurants or flights or trips. All you have to do is create a prompt that says, hey, AI agent, go do this thing for me. And it'll actually do it for you in the browser as if there's a ghost operating your machine. Now, when you think about what LLMs can actually do, this goes from being very messy at best to a complete privacy nightmare at worst. There's an insane example that I'm going to talk about a little later in this video that you're going to want to see. LLMs can't reason by themselves. They are essentially probabilistic pattern matching machines that use a bunch of linear algebra and matrix multiplications to try to predict what the highest chance of success response is to whatever you're trying to ask it to do. It literally looks at the words and text that you type, and it calculates a probability of what the next best thing should be following that. It doesn't have the same kind of high-level reasoning that humans have to quickly glance at something and say, oh, that seems off or that seems suspicious. If you ask it to give you something, it will do its very best to do that. When you think back to playing video games like Neopets or Club Penguin or something back in the day, when someone would type to you and say, give me your username and password, even as a kid, you wouldn't answer to that. You wouldn't give them your username and password. Well, maybe you would the first time, but then you'd learn a hard lesson. An LLM will try very hard to give away a password if that instruction gets to it. This means that companies have to invest millions of dollars. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets to billions eventually into something called AI safety. And AI safety are essentially a bajillion checks that they have to put on top of the LLM to make sure it doesn't return harmful material, like how to evade taxes or create a nuclear weapon in your basement. Those kind of things are not baked into an LLM inherently, and there's a lot of work and infrastructure that has to go around it, and companies are investing massively there. In this wild example that researchers were able to reproduce, the user asks the Perplexity Comet browser to simply summarize a web page. And in doing so, it's parsing all the text in that web page, but there is a comment on it that has instructions for the very agent parsing it. And it's telling it to essentially leak the username and one-time PIN code from a user just inherently in the text itself. It's a Reddit comment. And it gets tricked into executing the attacker's instructions in what's called a prompt injection attack. This can happen pretty much anywhere on the web, Facebook, Reddit, YouTube, you name it. Users can just type something they want there that an AI agent browser will parse and try to execute. And this is reproducible. The attacker tricks the user into clicking a malicious link. The link includes an embedded prompt that instructs the Comet browser what to do next. Comet then follows the attack instructions and extracts sensitive user information. That can be encoded, which just means it's kind of scrambled up a little bit to bypass security checks. And then it can get returned back to a remote server that the attacker controls, and boom, they've gotten your information or drained your crypto wallet. It can also get worse than this example. And what I mean by that is attackers have proved that they can just weaponize the URL itself, so that just by clicking on the URL, they can have instructions embedded in the text in the URL that will cause the browser to retrieve sensitive data that might be in its context. Let's say you're browsing a banking website. It can return that information to the attacker and then still direct you to the website that you thought you were clicking on the link of without you even knowing that an attack occurred. It's pretty scary. Companies even admit this is a fundamental problem and will remain to be a problem for the foreseeable future. Opera, who creates browsers, wrote that it is important to acknowledge that due to the non-deterministic nature of AI models, the risk of a successful prompt injection attack cannot be entirely reduced to zero. There's a great article about this written by Adam Conway that I'll link below that you should check out, which goes into a lot more detail than I did. Okay, but let's say companies do find a magical way, a silver bullet to prevent these class of prompt injection attacks from happening and make agentic browsers pretty secure. Are they okay to use then? In my opinion, no, because there's an entirely other class of issues with these browsers that comes from a more business perspective, or when you look at this from a non-technical point of view. And that is when you take a step back and you think, why are companies trying to create all of these products with so much AI baked into them? And the answer is they can control the stack that way. They can control data flow. And if you have an agentic browser that, let's say, an AI company owns, they can control what kind of information you see. So let's say you go back to the example, which would be convenient, to book a trip or book a hotel. Who do you think they're going to start showing hotels of down the road in 5 years? It's not going to be the best deal hotel. It's going to be whatever hotel has partnered with that AI company, or whatever hotel has paid ads to rank higher in AI responses. It's the same way that Google, built its business off of an ad empire, and that's just capitalism. It's going to rank things and show things higher that have paid a premium to show there. And I don't know about you, but for me, I don't want things picked for me that were just there because they were paid. I want things that are good quality. I want things that other people have talked about. I want things where I can see the reviews. And yes, it takes off the burden of thinking for that specific action, but at what cost? And it's a bit ironic because we as a society have invested so much effort and talent into making our browsers more secure and just the experience of being on the internet more secure. I remember as a kid, you could literally click on a link without downloading any executable and get malware on your machine. And the reason for that was because there were so many exploits and 0 days in Windows or in the browsers at that time that it was just the Wild West for attackers to exploit and get data on your machine that they shouldn't have access to. But there's been a lot of effort that's gone into that. It's generally pretty secure nowadays. When was the last time you heard a family member or a friend say, oh, I got hacked, or, oh, there was malware on my machine? Like, yeah, that happens, but compared to 10, 20 years ago, it's almost non-existent. And nowadays, we're going back to this world where you can just click on a link and get fully compromised just because of the new technologies that are being built into it. And I think that's just a tragedy for the industry as a whole if we really do move to that way, or we jump the gun on this. It's got to be thought through properly, and there's got to be security considerations that have gone into this. I'm not trying to be a Luddite and say that you should not use AI and that AI has all these problems. I think AI is pretty magical for certain applications and certain things. I think for prototyping, AI is fantastic, and I use it all the time for just creating little applications or projects or things that I have ideas for that would have taken me a long time otherwise to manually write all the code for. But in this case, for browsing on my own device, I really think it's a slippery slope. So please stop using AI browsers.